This video is on section 2.5, rational equations. It will go along with your homework assignment number 17A. Now remember, a rational equation is an equation that has a fraction in it. They ask you to solve, and the first thing you might want to consider is the domain before you solve the equation. If you look at this equation, right here when I look at 1 over x, I see an x in the denominator. So when we talk about domain, and remember if you have a fraction, you take your denominator, set it not equal to 0. So my domain, my x, I know right now cannot be 0. Now remember, x is what I'm solving for. I need to think about a common denominator. If I look, I have a 3, a 6, and an x, so I need something that all three of those will divide into, and that would be 6x for the least common denominator. Now, what I'm going to do is to multiply every term by the common denominator 6x. Now, my goal in doing this is to get rid of all fractions. Now, if you'll notice, I've multiplied every term by 6x. Now, let's reduce this. 3 will divide into 6, 2. 6 will divide into 6, 1. X will divide into x one time. Now, at this point, my denominators are gone. Now, let's multiply. 1 times 2 times x is 2x, minus 5 times 1 times x is negative 5x, equals 1 times 6 times 1 is 6. Let's combine like terms. I have negative 3x equals 6. If you divide both sides by negative 3, you have x equals negative 2. Now, remember, we found out at first x could not be 1. So this would be my answer, x equals negative 2. Your second problem has two fractions, and neither of them have a denominator with x in it. Neither of them has a radical in it. So my domain for this problem is all real numbers. Remember, any number. If I'm looking for my least common denominator, I take my denominators 3 and 2, and what would divide in, what number would 3 and 2 both divide into? And it could be 6. So I'm going to take my problem and multiply each term by 6. Okay. Now again, remember the goal is to get rid of your denominators. So 3 will divide into 6 2 times, 2 will divide into 6 3 times, and then I'm going to distribute. Now what I actually have here is 2 times x plus 1 minus 3 times x minus 1 equals 1 times 6. Now let's distribute. Be careful with your signs, and then combine like terms. 2x minus 3x is negative x, equals 6 minus 2 minus 3, or negative x equals 6 minus 5, which is 1, or divide by negative 1 and you have x equals negative 1. Now again, the domain was all real numbers, and I have x equal negative 1, so that is my solution. Alright, problem number 3. I do see an x in the denominator, so to find my domain, I'm going to set my denominator equal to 0. Now that's x or 2x or 3x, whichever. It's going to be x cannot be equal to 0. My common denominator would be something that x, 2x, and 3x all divide into, and that again would be the x, and then 3 times 2, so it would be 6x. Now let's multiply every term by 6x. Remember, the goal here is to get rid of our denominators. So this way you can read it. Now, we'll reduce here. X will divide, 2 will divide into 6 3 times, x will divide out, 3 will divide into 6 2 times. Now I have 6 times 1 is 6, plus 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 times 1 is 2, equals 30x, or 6 plus 3 plus 2 would be 11, equals 30x. Or divide to get x by itself, x would equal 11 over 30. Alright, on the next sheet, I have two problems. We'll try to get to both of these. Now, the first thing I notice in number 4 is that this denominator, x squared minus 4x, would factor to x times x minus 4. So looking at that and looking at the domain, I would have x minus 4 cannot be 0, and x cannot be 0. So x cannot be 4, or x cannot be 0. My common denominator would be a product of all the different denominators, which would be x times x minus 4. Now we're going to multiply x times x minus 4 times every term. First term, the second term, and then to the right of the equation, and I'm going to call that x squared minus 4x, x times x minus 4. I'm going to write that in factored form. Now let's reduce. X minus 4 divides out, x divides out, x divides, and x minus 4 divides. So I have x times 5x minus x minus 4 times 20 equals 80. That's going to be 5x squared minus 20x. Now remember, I'm distributing, plus 80 equals 80. Now I see a quadratic equation, so I'm bringing everything to one side, and 80, when I move this over, minus 80 would be equal 0. Now I have a common factor of 5x, and when I take that out, I have 5x to be set equal 0 and x minus 4 to equal 0. So I have an answer of x equals 4, and I have an answer of x equals 0. Now if you'll notice, this says x cannot be 0, so I can't use that answer. This part of the domain says that x cannot be 4. So even though I have two answers, neither of them will work because of the domain of the problem. Alright, problem number 5. Again, I'm going to factor into x plus 2 times x minus 2 in the denominator. My domain would be x plus 2 not equal 0, x not equal 0, and x minus 2 not equal 0. So x cannot be equal negative 2, cannot equal 0, or cannot equal 2. My common denominator will be x times x plus 2 times x minus 2. Now, to multiply every term, I've got to multiply by that factor by each term. So we can get rid of fractions. And again, in the denominator, I'm going to let that be x plus 2 times x minus 2. Alright. Now let's reduce. The x plus 2 divides out, the x divides out, and here the x plus 2 and x minus 2 divides out. So I now have 3x times x minus 2 plus 2 times x plus 2 times x minus 2 equals x times 4x minus 4. Or 3x squared minus 6x plus 2x squared minus 8 equals 4x squared minus 4x. Now if we bring all this to one side and combine like terms, we're going to have x squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. That'll factor into x minus 4, x plus 2, or that would give me x equals negative 4, x equals negative 2. Now remember, x cannot be negative 2, so my only answer would be, that's going to be x equals 4.